Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about a bit of a more grim topic in One Piece, that being death. More specifically, speculation of five characters I think will probably die before the end of One Piece. And this topic is kind of endlessly fascinating, particularly because Oda is so sparing when it comes to killing off characters, notoriously so. Due to instances where it seemed like a character died, and it probably would have been better that they died, but they came back alive anyway. Um, but I feel like he's been better with that more recently, uh, with examples like Pedro. Um, well, maybe not because Pound is still alive, and he very well. I doubt he's gonna be. Any case, I'm getting off into a tangent. Um, with at One Piece getting ever closer to the conclusion, supposedly within 5 years of it. By now, probably closer to four even. Uh, I imagine he's gonna ramp up the action a little bit with deaths, especially where we are now in the story with Wano and how basically it's shaping up. The world is probably going to look a lot different by the time the Straw Hats leave Wano, and that may or may not involve a lot of deaths. And some of the people I'll list will probably die in Wano. Some people will probably be far after. So I'll just hop into it. And number five will be Kinemon. Uh, there's been a lot of death flags surrounding all of the scabbards, but Kinemon really takes the cake here. I mean, just a couple chapters ago, what would it have been, 995 maybe? They were all declaring how, they were pretty much willing to give their lives in the fight against Kaido. And, maybe two chapters ago, maybe it was three, when Kaido was turning around the fight and we saw the scabbards getting slapped around, I probably would have put Kinemon much higher, maybe number one, because again, there's been it from the start of Wano, it seemed almost guaranteed that some of the scabbards are going to die, and Kinemon for a lot of people was at the top of that list. But right now, all of them are fine, and they've been teleported off of the roof of Onigashima. So I mean, I still think it's not impossible for Kinemon to die. But how it's looking right now, it looks like all the scabbards are safe. I can't imagine a situation in my mind in which the scabbards are going to end up fighting Kaido again, or some other adversary that would be worthy of killing them. Because I don't want them to just die to, like, I don't know, the Oniwa Banshu or something like that. Kanjiro could be still alive and maybe kill one off, but I doubt that. When Kanjiro first died or was defeated, I was sure that that wasn't really him, but here we are, like, probably, what, 16 chapters later, maybe? 17 even? And he still hasn't come back. Same with Orochi. I was certain that he was going to come back soon, but it's been a while. We still heard nothing from him, so yeah, I'm getting increasingly unsure about that. Not entirely, but I feel like at least one of them's got to still be alive somehow, uh, because it seemed very abrupt. But again, I'm getting off topic. Kinemon, number five, the lowest of the list, but still, I think, given all the death flags surrounding him, is probably the most likely candidate for a death in Wano. And moving on to number four, we have Shanks, which is of the five, I think is probably the most speculative, because there's no like real absurd evidence that Shanks will die. But a lot of people in the community have been tossing the idea around that around the time of the final war, or whenever it'd be appropriate, Shanks will die, likely at the hands of Blackbeard. Um, and I personally am a fan of this idea. I think that would be a great place, um, or a great motivation for Luffy, especially against Blackbeard, because we saw that while he definitely does have a hatred for Blackbeard, um, he definitely blames Sakazuki more for the death of Ace. We saw that at one point when Akainu was mentioned, and he held his chest, like just the mention of Akainu's name would make his scar hurt. So right now he definitely has more of a vendetta against Sakazuki more than anyone else, and seeing that Blackbeard is more than likely going to be the main antagonist of the series, um, it definitely would be good to give him more motivation to directly contest Blackbeard. And Shanks being that driving force, the death of Shanks would probably be the best way to go about it. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much speculation. I've only heard the idea tossed around. I haven't heard any concrete evidence that this will happen. Maybe there is some. I certainly haven't seen any, but I'm definitely a fan of this idea. I think Shanks dying would probably be one of the best fates for him, similar to like a kite situation in Hunter x Hunter. Pretty much exactly like that, actually. They're both motivational figures for the character in chapter one that set them off on their journey, or inspired them to get set off on their journey later in life. And Kite dying was such a beautiful character moment for Gon. I think a similar situation would work wonders for Luffy's character and One Piece as a whole. But speaking of Luffy, number 3 is unfortunately our protagonist, Monkey D. Luffy. Mostly due to the parallels of Roger having died at the end of his journey. And the thing with Luffy dying, with Roger's death actually, is that basically the whole catalyst for him turning himself in. Well, maybe not. Maybe he was intending to the entire time. But the catalyst for him turning himself in to be executed and starting the Great Pirate Era was that he had an incurable disease, and Crocus was basically keeping him alive for the entire last leg of his journey. And there, with the incurable disease thing, there's been a lot of clues that a similar thing might happen to Luffy, particularly surrounding his diminishing lifespan. Now, Oda's the kind of guy that drops a lot of clues, a lot of small details about things that'll be major later in the story, and it can just be like a single thing, like a single small thing that'll be overlooked. Like Sanji back in Jaya saying that he was from the North Blue, which big implications in Whole Cake Island, and what else? Lola giving Nami Big Mom's favorite card before we even knew who Big Mom was. But again, became super important back in Whole Cake Island. And to think that I don't know if it's happened at all post time skip, but to think that pre time skip there are many instances in which Oda took care to point out that Luffy's lifespan was being affected, I think that'll definitely have some consequences later down the line, and possibly lead to Luffy being on a time limit and possibly dying at the end of the series. Whether he chooses to turn himself in, well, that's assuming that the Marine and World Government Institution is still around by the end of One Piece. But if he turns himself in, whether or not he turns himself in and gets executed in the same fashion as Roger, or if he just dies due to a diminishing lifespan or something of the like. It's very possible that this is telling us that Luffy will die at the end. And the only reason I'm not quite sure about this is Chopper. Chopper is one of those Chopper's dream ambition, because all Straw Hats have an ambition, but his ambition is to be a doctor that can cure anything. And in that field, we haven't really seen any major. It hasn't really been focused on much. Obviously we know he's getting better. We saw him studying medicine a lot during the time skip, and during Punk Hazard, and right now during the Onigashima raid, with the Ice Oni virus, his medical skills have taken precedent a lot of times. But again, we haven't really seen him bring up his goal or make any major pronounced steps toward that goal at all. So the completion of Chopper's character arc could possibly be freeing Luffy from his fate and being able to cure somehow extend his lifespan that has been dwindling since Lucci said his Gear Second would be taking away his lifespan. What's his face? I totally forgot his name. Ivankov, that's it. On multiple occasions, both in Marineford and Impel Down, said that his hormones would cause Luffy's lifespan to be diminished. So, those things will probably add up, I imagine. And, if Chopper can find a way to, cure that or essentially extend Luffy's lifespan in a way, then I think that'll probably be like the best final test for him that it could possibly get. But other than that, yeah. Moving on to number 2, we have Kaido. And, it might seem a little bit, easy to just say, oh, the main villain's going to die, or the main villain of our current arc is going to die. But when you think about it, it's pretty unusual for a major antagonist to die. I don't even know. Is there even any instances of that happening? I can't name one off the top of my head. But, just thinking about it, Crocodile's still alive. Rob Lucci's still alive. Gecko Moria might be dead, but he didn't die because of Luffy. He died, possibly because of Blackbeard, in very recent times. And who else? Doflamingo's still alive. So, the main antagonist being killed is, very uncommon, if happened at all. So why do I think Kaido will die? Mostly because of his, fascination surrounding death. His characterization pretty much entirely surrounds death. Obviously, we were introduced to him as suicidal. The first time we saw him was after he jumped off of a sky island and lived. That, of course, introducing us to the fact that he'd been caught and tortured and tried to drown himself, and basically every possible means to try and get himself to die, and he cannot do it, and no one else can do it. Which, is obviously the irony surrounding his character. He, more so than anyone else in the series, he has the greatest philosophy surrounding death, basically meaning that death completes somebody, as we saw him say to the Scabbards, and that he obviously reveres, people like Whitebeard and Roger, saying that they did it right, because their death started an era, pretty much, or greater continued era, I don't know, in the case of Whitebeard, but he wants to die in a great fashion like that. And on a further note, like I said earlier, after Wano is over, the One Piece world is going to look greatly different from what it does right now. And if, with two out of the 4 emperors probably going down this arc, obviously. So, at least one of them dying would probably be pretty essential in that process. I'm not terribly sure if Big Mom's going to die, but she might, based on the next point I'm going to make, which is that I can't imagine, with like the cases like Rob Lucci and Crocodile, sure, they're still around, but they're not, they're pretty much harmless at the moment. Well, I shouldn't say harmless, but they're doing nothing terribly of note at the moment. Well, I guess at least in Crocodile's case, you could make an argument for Rob Lucci, but all we've seen him do really is defend the Celestial Dragons on Revelry, and he might have been in Wano and Dressrosa doing deals with Orochi and Doflamingo, but we don't know because those guys were all masked. So it very well might not have even been him in those cases. But, actually, we did see Lucci on Dressrosa for sure, but he still might not have been the ones on Wano. In any case, I can't imagine someone like Kaido still being around after Wano, and still you can't, like, obviously Crocodile, he was only dangerous. I mean, obviously he's dangerous, but he's only dangerous due to a plan that was, many years in the making, and Luffy destroyed that plan, and he had nowhere else to go, pretty much. But Kaido, obviously we've learned about the new Onigashima project, but that wasn't, the initial driving force between wanting to take down Kaido. They wanted to take down Kaido for the very fact that he is Kaido, that he is the strongest creature in the world, and I can't imagine, him defeating Kaido but letting him live. because he will still be that threat. He's not gonna just take that and kind of just sulk into the background like someone like Crocodile did. Um, and possibly the only way I see him not dying is because he wants the glorious death that someone like Whitebeard or Roger had. And what I mean by that is Oda once stated that the reason Luffy a lot of the times doesn't kill the villains is due to the fact that there's a much larger potency in destroying their dreams and letting them live after that than just straight up killing them. And in the case of uh, Kaido, if he gets killed in battle by the future Pirate King, that would definitely let him achieve his dream to some extent. So that would definitely be a very different style to what Luffy usually does if he does get killed. So really, that could also be a detractor from this theory. But I think possibly the best end to Kaido going forward is if Oda can somehow find a way for him to die that would not be glorious at all, but would also be satisfying. Because obviously, I think it'd be best if he dies in a rather lame way that the world will never know about. But also that could be kind of boring from a story standpoint. So it's kind of tricky. I don't know if there's any good way to do that. But if there is, I think that's probably the best way for Kaido to meet his end. But with that said, we're moving on to number one. The most likely character I think will die is Trafalgar Law. Quite simply due to the fact of the immortality operation. The idea that due to his Opi Opi no Mi, that he can give his life to give infinite youth or immortality to another individual. And the fact that this was introduced at all makes me think that Trafalgar Law is going to die. Because again, like I said, Oda doesn't, there's most instances in which Oda introduces a detail that may seem, somewhat insignificant at the time. And not that it was insignificant, it was the, major driving force for Doflamingo wanting to get his hands on Law. But I don't see any reason why Oda would go to the trouble of introducing this just to make it, never come into use. I think it's very likely that Law will, before the end of the story, give his life or be forced to give his life to perform the immortality operation. Most likely on Luffy. That's probably the most likely candidate, and obviously that would mean that Luffy probably isn't going to die to his shortening lifespan. But somehow I don't feel like, again, since the stuff I said about Chopper, I don't think Law would be the best solution to this thing. It's possible that he doesn't use it at all, but it's also the crux for something that happens later down the line. Like maybe Eam. Most people theorize that Eam has been alive since the Void Century, so maybe he has to get his hand on the Opa Opa no Mi every once in a while to preserve his life or whatever. Because there's a bit of debate as to whether it actually grants immortality or if it just extends your lifespan or gives you extended youth. So he might need to use it every couple hundred years again to extend his life, and he might come after Trafalgar Law at some point. And but other than that, I don't see any way. And there's a possibility. I cut myself off. There's a possibility that the Straw has to have to save Law from that, which would obviously end up with him still living. But other than that, I think that's a slim possibility. I think the very existence of the immortality operation means that Trafalgar Law will likely die before the end of the story. But with that being said, I think those are the 5 most likely candidates for a death before the end of the story. Yeah. See you guys later. Hope you enjoyed. And yeah, I'm out.